He's gonna shove it.
Yeah!
He's gonna shove it.
Alright, it's the biggest smack talker around. I never fail to make your girl frown when I take her downtown and she drops her gown. HAWK all night, all day. As you can tell, a big fan of Scott Steiner. His promos, his intimidating presence and his craziness always had me watching in awe. So when I got a YouTube suggestion from Charles of Austria to cover some more Steiner, how could I resist? And I think old Charles asked a pretty good question. Was Scott Steiner's WCW main event run good? Because it's Steiner, I instantly wanted to say yes. But then I smacked myself and thought about it. Actually, I don't know. People have come on to appreciate Scotty more and more as the years have gone by, but we all have a habit of looking back on things from this era and saying they were incredible just because they compare better to some things from today. People say that he should have been treated better by the WWE in 2002 and had a world title run, but we need some evidence of that. Scott Steiner was a slow burn in WCW. He did his tag team with Rick, the NWO, and then he dyed his hair and went a bit crazy as we witnessed the birth of Big Papa Pump and Roid Rage Mania. At that point, he wasn't instantly a main eventer, and he was likely seen to be in the upper mid-card as the US champion. So we're going to be looking at his promos, his matches and his storylines to ultimately answer the question. Scott Steiner as a main eventer, was he any good? Our story of Steiner as a main event talent starts in the year 2000. He's been playing second fiddle to guys like Nash, Booker, Jarrett and Goldberg. Steiner's Roid Rage gimmick has just started to come into his own. WCW are pushing him as this completely unhinged, unpredictable man with serious problems. His mental state is referenced as the thing that's holding back his career. It's a Roid Rage gimmick. But that would all change at Mayhem 2000 in November. But first, before Mayhem, over on Thunder, there's an unexpected banger of a match between Steiner and Big Vito. I think this match shows exactly what Steiner can actually do in the ring. You wouldn't expect matches like this to have happened in WCW 2000. Anyway, Mayhem opens up with an incredible video package. Steiner is smashing tables with a baseball bat. Scott Steiner challenges for Booker's title in a caged heat match. That seems to be a Hell in a Cell match with a straitjacket hanging overhead for some reason. In this match, Steiner throws Booker all over the ring with all sorts of suplexes, but Steiner also takes his fair share of bumps too. If you try to ignore the dumb straitjacket, which is essentially pointless, there is some excellent wrestling to be seen in this match. Steiner wins his first WCW World title, making him a Triple Crown champion in a pretty underrated match. So Steiner is now the champion. Is this going to be enjoyable or trash? Really loud but mixed reaction as Steiner returns on Nitro as the champion. It seems like he's going to be a heel for this one. I have one negative. No more Shakira with Steiner. He just has Medeja. Shakira was fired because she refused to train as a wrestler. Steiner apparently celebrated his title win with a line of freaks in bed. He also talks about his lack of competition because he's taken them all out. Ric Flair tries to lecture Steiner about how to conduct himself as a champion. Then, Steiner completely loses the plot. Flair has a mystery opponent, and Steiner says that it's Stone Cold Steve Austin, who Flair ran out of WCW last time. Now Steiner starts doing rock impressions if you smell what the Steiner is cooking. Stevie Ray is the man to come out and fight him in defense of his brother. Steiner tells him he's a punk announcer and he's not good enough. Scott feels sorry for him and makes a match for the title, but if Stevie loses, he loses his career. This is a really nice promo trade-off. It has comedy, it has insults, and they both sell what the other is saying. It's followed up later that night with Steiner saying he doesn't care who he faces for the belt on pay-per-view. He hates Flair and finds his limo. The save from the Bellcaster in the limo, and Steiner calls them all ugly bitches and he beats up the limo driver. The match with Stevie obviously isn't as great as the one with Booker, but I will say it's an 8-minute match with lots of throws and suplexes again. It's more than you would expect from a WCW main event. Steiner is certainly moving around fine at this point in his career, and he wins clean and simply. So far, this might be the best booked world champion of all time, but it's only been a week to be fair. Next up, Scott Steiner, Sid Vicious makes a return to WCW, and he's deemed to be the pay-per-view opponent. This is because he was unfairly stripped of the belt and never lost it when Russo and Bischoff reset the company. That makes perfect sense to be fair. But before that match, Steiner defends his title again on Thunder. This time it will be Steiner's former partner Buff Bagwell. I noticed at this point that he's been given the nickname The Superstar Scott Steiner. Not a fan of that at all, it sounds generic and unnecessary. Despite being distracted by Sid during the match, Steiner still wins it, and he's a strongly booked champion so far. Steiner continues to take his Roid Rage out in the locker room. Ric Flair and Arn Anderson. It's just great to see such an unhinged man, it makes for compelling television. Steiner takes out the Raging Cajun while screaming, "I don't know who you are." Flair threatens to suspend him for his actions, but he doesn't do it. Steiner and Sid Vicious are not allowed to touch each other until the pay-per-view. Because Steiner is so unhinged and aggressive, this means he wants to fight everyone, and it means that he's a regular fighting champion. He just enjoys killing guys. He has defences against the Wall and Ming before his big pay-per-view match. That's 5 defences before his pay-per-view match. Impressive. It's surprising how long it took to get to Starrcade 2000, but we did it. There are so many Steiner matches and promos, and WCW is truly built around him at this point. It's going to be interesting to see if this match will suck or not. It's two similar wrestlers in Steiner and Sid. Now, whilst this match isn't terrible, and it's full of hard-hitting moves, it suffers badly from way too many ref bumps and interference, and it's just a mess. That's not Steiner's fault, but it possibly weakens his reign. I'm withholding judgment on this one, it's neither positive or negative. Steiner retains the belt, which is already the most continuity that the world title has had in WCW for a long time. Steiner moves on from that to continue to cause grief for WCW management figure Ric Flair. Steiner's still complaining that there isn't enough competition. He wants Diamond Dallas Page to get a sex change so he can grow the balls to face him. Flair addresses that and they have an entertaining exchange on the microphone. Unfortunately, Flair decides that Steiner's next pay-per-view will be a triple threat match. It really feels like they want to be doing a Flair vs Steiner match at this point, but they don't. Steiner throws a chair at his friend Slapnuts. I love seeing Jarrett treated like this. He looks like such a Memphis mid-carder stood next to Steiner. Slapnuts is going to be one of the men challenging Steiner at the pay-per-view, but he says he's only doing it just to protect Scotty. I just love how the show is built around Steiner having roid rages backstage. Nobody is safe around Steiner. The broadcast schedule is badly affected over the Christmas period, right when Steiner had momentum, a damn shame, but he'll be back. So it's almost pay-per-view time already, and it just doesn't feel like anything worth watching. Ric Flair isn't happy about Steiner and Jarrett's friendship, so he turns the pay-per-view match into a four-way and deliberately drives a wedge between them by making them have a match against each other on Nitro for the title. The fourth man in that four-way at the pay-per-view is a masked moron. The outfit he's wearing is terrible. What the hawk would WCW thinking? Flair forces the match to go ahead with Slapnuts by threatening to strip Scott of the belt. So we've got a match here. Steiner's throwing Slapnuts around like a cruiserweight. It's probably the most enjoyable 5 minutes of my life. Or at least since your girl paid me a visit it was. The only negative of this is that Steiner was unable to beat Jarrett because Sid interferes and it was thrown out. Over on Thunder, Steiner and Sid clash for the title. This match seems to be more about building up Sid, and he has Steiner beaten a couple of times. That is until the masked moron interferes again and the match is thrown out. Steiner's booking and the match quality has gotten noticeably weaker since Christmas. On to the Sin pay-per-view where we've got a four-way for the title. Or at least I thought it was. Flair tells them that the mystery man hasn't yet arrived in the building. Wow, they had 3 weeks to get this guy to the building on time. Hope he's not expecting a paycheck for this performance. So instead, this match is essentially a 2-on-1 handicap match because Steiner and Jarrett have made up since their match. Now, I am a fan of Sid Vicious, but this pay-per-view won't be his proudest moment. The masked moron has arrived in the building late into the match. We cut back from that and Sid Vicious is in the ring with a broken leg. Well, if you need someone to stall for time, Steiner can certainly do that in a more entertaining way than most. The masked moron is coming down the ramp, but instead he hits Vicious once and then Steiner retains the belt. The masked moron is unmasked and it's Road Warrior Animal. Pretty disappointing. What a mess, one of the worst pay-per-view main events of all time. Goldberg is done with WCW, Sid is done with WCW, Hogan is done with WCW, and for some reason the morons in charge have decided to create a new faction with the remaining wrestlers. Meet the Magnificent Seven. There's nothing magnificent about them. It's the NWO all over again. It's Lex Luger, Bagwell, Slapnuts, Flair, the Road Warrior and Steiner. Wait, that's just 6. Well, it is for now at least. Steiner is now just shoved in the background. Flair is the leader of the group and the mouthpiece. I thought Steiner hated Flair. Because WCW had pretty much nobody left, Kevin Nash is here now. And no, he's not the 7th member of the group. That's a big surprise in itself. Nash is going to be Steiner's next challenger. Nash is also joined by DDP and Scott's brother Rick. So we've got Scott Steiner versus Kevin Nash for the belt. You'd think I'd hate on this match, but no. Kevin Nash is insanely popular with the WCW crowd. I can't hate on him being in the main event. However, what I can hate on is that Scott Steiner can't win any matches now because he has his own faction saving his ass each week. Well, I say each week, but he's not even wrestling each week anymore. Kevin Nash wins the title shot for the next pay-per-view. But first, Steiner cuts a promo. It feels like it's been a while. Steiner threatens Chronic for siding with Kevin Nash and says at Super Brawl Kevin Nash will end up in hospital. He comes dangerously close to stumbling all over his words, but just about keeps his composure. Now Steiner and Animal take on Chronic. Steiner shows he can still wrestle, but once again the match is mobbed with interference for the Magnificent Seven. And they lose to Chronic. Over on Nitro, Steiner isn't happy about Madeja getting hit on. She spits on, I think it was the Raging Cajun's face, I can't tell. I've noticed her slowly getting a bit more mic time as this goes on. Steiner is supposed to be facing Nash, but instead he randomly cuts a promo cutting down Goldberg for being a coward and not facing him. Admittedly, Steiner has an impressive list of credentials now. Wins over Sting, Booker and Sid Vicious, and he uses that as evidence to Kevin Nash not standing a chance against him. Sensible promo. Steiner is threatened by Chronic, but of course he doesn't fight them on his own because he's got the rest of his faction with him. Why does Steiner have to be a cowardly heel? He's proven he's better than that. There's something that doesn't sit comfortably with me, hearing Steiner tell Flair over and over that he's the man. There's still the odd flash of brilliance, like this moment here where the crew storm a police station and Steiner threatens a police officer with a baseball bat. But then it goes wrong because like a complete group of dumbasses they all end up walking into a jail cell getting locked in there together. Are we really doing cartoon comedy of Steiner now? They don't seem to do much hard time and they're back on the next Nitro. Nash and the Cat take control of the next episode of Nitro and they force Steiner to have a handicap match. They call him Big Papa Dump. But I guess the roster was so weak at this point that they booked Steiner in a handicap match against 4 cruiserweights. But it turns out he isn't done and he says Steiner will have to pull triple duty on this show. He will also face DDP in a singles match and then that's followed up by a handicap match against Kevin Nash and Rick Steiner. Wow, this isn't the show for you if you're not a fan of Steiner. First he faces the Young Dragons and Evan Courageous and Jamie Noble. Wow, I think I love this match. The cruiserweights all take some insane bumps as Steiner kills them all. Steiner doesn't want to end the match until all 4 men aren't getting up again. It's non-stop entertainment. I love this match so much. Eventually, Steiner wins with a triple Steiner recliner, which is just a hilarious image to see. Next up, it's DDP. The match is nothing and Steiner is DQ'd. Finally, it's the handicap match against Rick Steiner and Kevin Nash with the world title on the line. It's cool seeing the 2 brothers fight. Apart from that, the only reveal highlight is that Rick Steiner turns on Kevin Nash with 1 elbow drop, which is somehow enough for Scott Steiner to pin Kevin Nash. An elbow drop. Guess there's no point watching that pay-per-view match between Steiner and Nash now if Nash is beaten so easily. The Magnificent 7 is now officially a 7. They really didn't need anybody else. Why oh why does Scott Steiner keep getting pep talks from Ric Flair? It's just unnecessary. Because WCW are dumb, they decide to have Nash and Steiner face off for the belt before the actual pay-per-view. Steiner's charging around backstage trying to find Kevin Nash, but this just doesn't feel like the rages we all loved and missed. He just wasn't raging enough. Of course, the match goes short and ends because of interference from the not-so-magnificent 7. I wish these guys would fuck off. On to Super Brawl Revenge. This match now somehow has the stipulation that if Kevin Nash loses, he's fired. Lots of people losing their jobs around here. Before the match can start, Steiner wants to do his own ring announcing. He reminds us that he's beaten all the top stars in WCW and sent them home. Nash pretends that he's hurt, but he actually isn't, and he smacks Steiner with the belt and the ref counts to 3. Slick Rick saves his ass and proclaims that this is a no DQ 2 out of 3 falls match. DDP, the only other man left, is locked in a coffin-like box. He looks half dead anyway. Medeja has to try and take out Kevin Nash because Steiner has become so weak. It has the desired effect and Steiner uses his little pipe and sticks it in Nash to get the 3. It's just a bunch of senseless violence without the intended drama. Nash has it won several times, but a combination of Medeja and Flair keeps stopping him. Kevin Nash eventually takes her out, but Steiner wins the match anyway. It's a match that I rather hadn't seen. Why did he need so much help to win? The not-so-magnificent 7 hold yet another funeral. Despite Steiner being the one to end Nash's career, Flair does most of the talking. But admittedly, Steiner is the only other person to talk in the group. Isn't it so much more enjoyable having Slapnut sat in silence in the background? Then the segment improves as Steiner turns it into a funeral for all the people that he's beaten. A lot of people knock Steiner for not being able to speak in clear, coherent sentences, but this is a long-ass Steiner promo. He eventually reveals that the only person he has left to take out is Diamond Dallas Page, who's played by Chris Kanyon here for some reason. Steiner's dishing out all the orders to the troops, and it feels like he's actually in charge here. This is a segment worth checking out. It is unclear if Kanyon was actually a member of this group, but he keeps hanging around with them. Steiner faces Hugh Morris in the main event of Thunder. It's hard to care. Okay, I'm being a bit harsh. It's actually the best match in longer than I care to remember. Steiner eventually wins a match, finally fair and square, and that certainly helped my opinion of this match. Okay, we're starting to wind this video down now, and it's almost the end of WCW. I think I formed a pretty clear opinion of Steiner as a main eventer. Steiner is at his best when things aren't going his way, and when we get glimpses of his roid rage, but it's just not happening often enough for my liking. But whenever he did rage out, it was the highlight of the show. There's really only 2 things left that I'd like to mention before we wrap this one up like a punch to a snake's gut. On to the final ever WCW pay-per-view, it's Greed. It's Steiner defending the belt against Diamond Dallas Page, the only man Steiner has not been able to take out. In the biggest shock of 2001, Scott Steiner not only retains the title, but the match is also really damn good. I literally can't believe that Steiner has held that belt for so long. It just doesn't seem like something WCW would do. A storyline was started up that members of the Seven were being discovered knocked out backstage. It was a big mystery that left everyone scratching their asses. But we'd never get to find out the conclusion to that storyline because the WWF purchased the WCW. My money was on the dog. That guy was vicious. On the final Nitro, Steiner faces Booker T in a match with both the world title and the US title on the line. It's only a 5-minute match, but it's the definition of get all your stuff in. Very enjoyable, and unfortunately for Steiner, he loses to the bookend, ending Scott Steiner's title reign at 120 days, the only person to last over 100 days with the belt since Bill Goldberg in 1998. Impressive. Ugh. The problem with this whole thing is Steiner is best when he has something to be pissed off about. In 2001, he had the belt, he had his own faction, and nobody was screwing with them because Flair was in charge of the company. He had no reason to fly into a fit of roid rage, which meant that he was less entertaining. Now, the Hawk doesn't take no roids, but I'm close to flying into a fit of rage over this. Just look how he was at the end of the year 2000, it was incredible. Look, I'm being too harsh here, I know. This was still really good, but it could have been one of the best runs of all time. Just look how it started, it was captivating telly. But we soon fall into the usual WCW rubbish of factions and overbooking. After watching this back, I can see why people are saying WWE missed the boat with Steiner in the WWE. But by the time he got there, he was too injured and immobile. So we really didn't get to witness Steiner as a main eventer for more than 4 months. WCW were too slow with his push. This was an extremely enjoyable video to make, and the main event run of Scott Steiner was most definitely good. And if you don't agree with that, I'll slap you where you stood.